Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. You are logged into EDTA's Electric Vehicle Innovation Forum's infrastructure panel discussion. And my name is Kyle Davis. I work for a company called Enel. I am based out of Washington, D.C., and I handle the federal policy. With me today are 5 wonderful panelists who are going to talk to you today about what their experiences have been and what their companies are currently doing on the infrastructure space. So with that, I don't want to delay the discussion. Just to let you know, we'll do the introductions about 5 minutes a person, and then turn it over to a Q&A for the panelists to respond to, and then we'll wrap up that portion of the panel and turn to your live Q&A. So let me go ahead and start, first of all, by introducing all 5 of our panelists, and then I will turn to each one of them to provide you additional background. So our first guest today is Michael Backstrom. He's the Managing Director of Energy and Environmental Policy for Southern California Edison. Next, we have Rob Barrosa, who's the Senior Director of Sales, Business Development, and Marketing with Electrify America. We have Kelly Helfrich, who's a manager with the Electric Vehicle Grid Integration and Strategy for General Motors. Lincoln Wood is our next guest, who's the Electrification Policy Manager from Southern Company. And then last but not least is Doron Frenkel, who's the founder and CEO of a company called Driivz. So with that, let me go ahead and start with you, Michael, if you would please introduce yourself to the audience and give us a little bit of an update on what it is Southern California is doing, or Southern California Edison is doing on the electric vehicle infrastructure space.
Sure, thank you, Kyle, and I'm really pleased to be a part of this panel today. So I've been with our company now for a little over 15 years, and I would have to say that in the last 3 years or so, the degree of excitement and activity around electric transportation and the opportunities that we've been able to grow for our customers has been really tremendous. In terms of the types of things that we're focusing on as a company, folks may be familiar out there. We've put out a vision for achievement of carbon neutrality in our state by 2045, consistent with our state's goals. That's known as the Pathway 2045. And in that, we lay out a view of decarbonization and electrification on an economy-wide basis that is foundational to achieving that vision in a cost-effective and timely way. A huge portion of achieving those carbon reductions in our state do come from electrification in the transportation sector. So for example, part of the targets that we lay out include the transition ultimately by 2045 to 75% of all light duty vehicles on the road, as well as about 2/3 and 1/3 respectively of medium and heavy duty vehicles transitioning to zero emissions, and in particular through electrification of those vehicles. Achieving that vision is going to be a really critical step and has a lot to it over a multiple year period, including the near years here with us. Most recently, we also had an announcement from our governor putting out an executive order just last week, setting some aggressive targets in line with that achievement of significant electrification adoption in our state, calling for 100% of new vehicle sales, for example, in the light duty sector being zero emission by 2035. To do that is going to take a lot of support, both from an infrastructure development standpoint, as well as ultimately addressing the affordability and accessibility of vehicles. I'll focus mostly here in my introduction on the accessibility of infrastructure and what we're doing. And I'm sure as we continue in the panel, there'll be opportunities to talk about other elements of EV adoption and what that would mean for customers. But when it comes to infrastructure development at Southern California Edison, we're very proud of the fact that we have the largest both light duty and medium and heavy duty infrastructure programs for a single utility in the country. These are all known as our suite of Charge Ready programs, and they address a host of different segments and needs for our customers. So I'll just give a quick highlight of those, and that'll wrap up my introductory remarks. So when it comes to our Charge Ready programs, in combined view, they will be supporting the deployment of over 40,000 EV charging ports in our service territory over the next 4 to 5 years, with an investment of about $800 million in infrastructure to get us there. And this is kind of a part of the total ecosystem of needs for our region and our state, but an important one that we're really proud to be playing a part of. So kind of touching on these different programs under the Charge Ready umbrella, we have our light duty program, which is kind of the namesake of all of this, the Charge Ready pilot, which was originally launched in 2016, and now most recently expanded in our Charge Ready 2 program. This focuses on providing largely make-ready infrastructure for electric vehicle charging equipment at public locations, as well as multifamily locations across our service territory. To date, we've deployed close to 2,000 charging ports under the original pilot program. And now with the recent approval we've gotten from our commission, we have an expansion to another 22,000 make-readies over the coming years. And we've now paired with that as well rebates for new construction development to install electric vehicle chargers. And under the whole host of programs, we do offer rebates for the actual charging equipment that site owners will procure and deploy at their locations. We also have in the light duty space some particular programs focused on deployment for schools and parks and state beaches, which were set up through a supplemental legislative set of bills. And so that focus is likewise getting out to those particular segments with additional services over a 2-year span. And then we have work in DC fast charging as well, also on the pilot basis, where we are deploying about 14 fast chargers at 5 sites across our service territory. And finally, I'll highlight on the medium and heavy duty side our Charge Ready transport program, which is focused specifically on the charging needs for fleet and in the medium and heavy duty space. That is a 5-year program for which we are seeking to electrify about 870 sites across our service territory that could support close to 8,500 vehicle conversions to zero emissions. And that runs the spectrum between our class 2 through class 8 vehicles, some of which are available and moving now, as well as transit buses, and then the class 8s that are going to be coming along as we've been seeing with technology development. So this is a really exciting time for us from both a policy standpoint, approval of these programs, and now their deployment. We are moving to scale and there's a lot to be done, but we're really excited about the partnership in our region with customers and site hosts to get this infrastructure out there to support the EV transformation in our state. So thanks for having me.
That's amazing. Thank you, Michael. As expected, California tends to be leading on the transportation electrification. A lot of information to unpack there. I look forward to the discussion with the rest of the panelists. But let's move on to the next guest, Robert Barrosa, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and what Electrify America is up to these days. Thanks.
Sure. So thank you very much for having me. For those of you who may not be familiar with Electrify America, we're a company that's committed to increasing the awareness and adoption of zero emission vehicles throughout the US. And the way we do that is through the build out of an ultra fast national charging network. To that effect, we are the largest ultra-fast public charging network across the US, so widely so that about 96% of Americans live within 120 miles of our stations. And really what we're trying to do is build that confidence in drivers when they think about an EV, now that they know that they're out there, right? The first question is, where do I charge? How can I charge? Can I get to my destination? So we really found that having this robust, ultra-fast charging network gives consumers confidence that they can make the switch, and that's our mission. We are brand neutral, so many of you know we are a wholly owned subsidiary of Volkswagen Group of America, but we are brand neutral. So really, we're an independent company that's focused on driving electrification for all brands. So anyone can come to our stations with a CCS or CHAdeMO connector and be able to use our stations. Today we have about 470 stations operational across the US. That's about 2,000 individual chargers. And we're on track to deploy about 800 stations by the end of 2021, which is about 3,500 chargers. We're on a fast pace, right? This all started back in 2016, but 16, 17, and 18 were really the preparation for our broad launch. And so in 2019, we were opening stations at about 1.2 stations per business day. So huge breakneck speed, and we're continuing that pace. One of the things that makes us really unique is the speed of our stations, right? Not only the size of the stations, but the speed. So all our chargers are at least 150 kilowatts and can also get up to 350 kilowatts on some chargers, the fastest available in the market today. So we're really focused on, number one, delivering that speed, but also looking to the future as we see more vehicles coming to market with larger capacity batteries and also larger charge acceptance, like the Porsche Taycan, the Audi e-tron, and some of the other brands that are coming out. We see that speed is very critical. And so we want to match that with the infrastructure we're putting out, not only for today, but for the vehicles that are to come. So again, it's all about how do we drive that confidence in drivers and help that switch to EVs. We are a national network, so not only do we build out metros, but we have quite a few cross-country routes that are completed and still in development. So customers, when they buy a car and they ask, can I drive, if I buy it in LA, can I drive to New York? We can say, yes, you can. So even though they'll never do it, but they want to have that confidence that they can. So this network really builds that sort of reliability, that confidence that if I get into this car, I can drive it just like my ICE vehicle. Many of our stations are located at convenient locations. You'll see us in a lot of grocery stores like Kroger's or Save Marts, major retailers like Walmart, Sam's Clubs, Targets, restaurants, convenience stores, gas station outlets, and also premium malls like Simon's and other locations like that. So we're building them where people would like to go, where they would like to spend 10, 20, 30 minutes and make sure that we co-locate with the right type of amenities so that drivers have a better experience than what they do today when they fuel up their vehicles. Along with that, I think automakers have the realization that coupling the charging with the vehicle is very important. So we offer a lot of services and access to the network to our automaker partners. So we've announced deals with Audi, Byton, Fisker, Ford, Harley Davidson, Lucid, Porsche, Volkswagen, where there's some benefit of the network, either free charging for some period of time or so many kilowatt hours at the station. So we think it's very important to make sure that people understand what they're getting, how to charge the car, and answer that question so it's much easier for them to switch to an electric. So with that, I'll turn it over.
I appreciate that, Robert. Yeah, Enel does not do public charging stations in the United States. We do it in Europe. One of the most challenging sides of the electric infrastructure business. So really appreciate your insights and look forward to the comments during the panel discussion. Kelly, you're up next. I have to, in full disclosure, say I used to drive an EV1 and I currently drive a Chevy Volt. Big fan of the products. Great company. Love what you guys are doing. Can't wait to hear more about what GM is doing on the EV space today. So you're up.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. Well, hi everyone. Kelly Helfrich. I work at General Motors. I joined the company about 4 years ago, and when I joined joined right about the time that the company was launching the Bolt EV, and came into the Maven team, which was GM's car sharing and mobility group. What was interesting about that experience is it was a time where the company had just launched its first long range all electric vehicle, and we were working with rideshare partners to put these EVs into full-time rideshare applications. So lots of awesome learnings from that, because we, number one, learned that a long range EV can work for high mileage use cases. Number two, we got to see how rideshare drivers interacted with public DC fast charging stations, because they were doing 99% of their charging on DC fast. And then number three, we got a lot of great exposure with these vehicles in cities. We had over 1,000 of these Bolt EVs deployed across the country, and each day, each Bolt EV was transporting 8 to 10 rideshare passengers. And so I think from that experience with Maven, we got a ton of rich learnings that we've deployed now back into what we call the retail side, which is the traditional vehicle ownership model, and understanding how we can get more people to convert from ICE to EV, because as you may know, GM's fully committed to an all-electric future. And so as we as a company move toward that transition, we've got a lot of great experiences under our belt to be able to utilize, because we know that from a customer standpoint, the top 3 reasons people cite when answering why they won't purchase an EV are cost, range, and charging infrastructure. And so, you know, we've got a number of engineers and designers working on the first 2 to make sure we're developing vehicles that can fit more types of lifestyles, larger electric vehicles that people may want to suit their needs. We're working to drive the cost down, and we're working with our Ultium battery system to make sure we've got optimal ranges for our EVs to suit customer needs. And then on the third point, charging infrastructure, that's what our team's mission is to make sure that no one ever cites charging as a reason for not buying an EV. Because I can say as an EV driver, and I drive a Bolt EV, charging is the reason why I want to always be in an EV, because it's such a better experience than fueling at a gas station. So I cite charging as the reason I'm always going to drive an EV from now on. So we need to make sure that more people can shift their mindset to understand that charging is actually a much more convenient and better experience than fueling at a gasoline station. And so we've got a number of things that we're doing on the charging side to make sure it's a great experience for all. And obviously education and awareness is huge from that standpoint. We know from our Volt data, our Victor Volt data, and our Bolt EV information that most customers are charging at home. And so number one, we want to make sure the home experience is great and straightforward for the folks that can do home charging. There's never going to be a more convenient and low cost option than charging your electric vehicle at your home location. And so we've launched a partnership with Qmerit to make it easier for customers to find qualified electricians to come and do that install job for them if they need to upgrade their home, if they're looking to do level 2 charging. And then we're also doing a lot of work on the grid integration side to make sure that we're allowing our customers to get lowest cost kilowatt hours for overnight charging, align with their utilities rate schedules, and working with the power grid to make sure that our EVs can be used as a resource and can be optimally charged at times when it's best for the grid. On the public side, we've got our Energy Assist app, which is available to all Bolt EV drivers through My Chevy. And what we're doing there is we are taking data from the vehicle so that customers can intelligently plan a route. So, and we've got all of the charging networks in that app that are compatible with the Bolt EV. So we go with the CCS standard. So our focus in the public fast charging space specifically is really on partnerships and making sure that we've got the right partnerships in place to amplify the charging infrastructure for anyone in the space, because with the CCS standard, you know, our drivers can use the Electrify America stations, we can use EVgo, we can use ChargePoint, all of those. And so we've got good relationships with all of those. We did announce a partnership with EVgo earlier this year where we're going to work with them to build over 2,700 new DC charging stations over the next 5 years. And so we want to kind of just keep working in the industry overall to amp up all of the public charging infrastructure so people know that that it's essentially a non-issue, that they can get an EV and it can achieve all of their driving needs.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I'm really going to enjoy hearing more of GM's perspective on infrastructure needs and how the customers are currently using the chargers. That's terrific. Lincoln, now you're going to be up next. Southern Company, most people don't realize it, but the Southeast is a hotspot for electric vehicle commercialization. And I have to say the Southern Company has been a big leader in supporting the EV rollout there, as well as the infrastructure build out. Really excited to hear what's going on in the Southeast United States and what you guys are up to now. So over to you, Lincoln.
Sure, thank you, Kyle. And I'd like to second Kelly as the second Bolt EV driver on the call. You got to live, you know, in what you preach, and I certainly do that. So Southern's has had a long history in electric transportation. We were actually involved with some of the EV1 infrastructure rollout. We had charging stations for it back in the 90s. And I joined the company around 15 years ago as well. That seems to be a theme on this call today. And it's been interesting to watch, I guess, the evolution of what the company has done and then how the industry itself has changed. So electric transportation for us in the Southeast is not new, but the definition might not be exactly what you're thinking about. So when I say those words, I personally think light duty on-road. We've done a lot in off-road as well, where it might be electrifying ship-to-shore cranes or anything, maybe a conveyor belt for a mine, something like that. One of my favorites, if you've flown into Atlanta and you landed in Terminal F, everything in that terminal is electric, including the ground support equipment for the planes outside. And that was really due to emissions reasons that the airport could not expand if we hadn't helped them in that way. So fast forward, I guess, up to 2014, Georgia Power began its first pilot program to roll out 37 charging islands around the state, both level 2 and DC fast charge. And in our last rate case in 2019, Georgia actually got some additional funding, like $2 million per year for additional community charging islands, so an expansion of that network. And then another $6 million a year for make-ready infrastructure programs. So all those are in process now. But it's more than just the infrastructure itself. Another thing that we focus on, especially on the R&D side, is the operation of the infrastructure and interoperability and standards development through our research and development arm. We think a lot about, how fleet sustainability plays into this. We have customers coming to us on the medium and heavy duty side, as do many other utilities saying, I want to electrify my fleet. How does that work? And the approach to that might be a little bit different than maybe light duty. One of the things we just got through doing is we've had when I say system team, so 30 people from across the company in different areas, power delivery, national accounts, marketing, rates, all of that, looking across our 3 electric service company footprint and looking at what fleet electrification might mean for us and what that might mean in each different territory. I'm really excited to see where the industry is going, and to Kelly's point of additional makes and models that are coming out and coming to market. I can't wait to see where we go from here. I'm very happy that I'm maybe not the strange person driving an EV now. There's so many more on the road, especially in the Atlanta area, and just really can't wait to see where we go, and happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, appreciate your participating today, Lincoln, and again, a lot of kudos to what you guys are doing in the Southeast. Now, Doron, you are our entrepreneur, you are our risk taker. I am curious to hear what you think and your perspective on what this space means, especially for folks that are new and are interested in the supply chain and the commercialization opportunities. So I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to hear what you have to say, and welcome, and very much appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for inviting me. So I've started this journey about 8 years ago. Coming from the telco business, so I've seen the revolution that happened in the telcos. Then I was working in the fleet business. And then I look at the EVs and said, that might be an opportunity. And I figured out that we have 2 revolutions. One is the mobility revolution, and the other thing is the energy revolution. And being in the middle of it is something that sounds really exciting. And beyond that, being in a position that you can influence and make something which is better for our kids, reducing the pollution and doing something good, something that is kind of amazing. And I like revolutions because it's a point where you can make a change, you can make a difference. And if we fast forward today, the company, what we're doing is we are a pure software player. We've developed a system that serves as the operating system for large operators, EV charging operators. We are working globally in over 20 countries to support tens of thousands of chargers, hundreds of thousands in roaming. We support over 170 different types of chargers, and as said, over 20 countries. So we look at customers like EVgo. So Kelly, you've mentioned EVgo. We are supporting EVgo as the platform behind EV charging for over 2 years now. And we enable EVgo to develop their own additional stuff based on our platform. So currently we are managing a variety of chargers. It's level 2 chargers and fast chargers, home chargers, and public, semi-public, fleets. It's all over. And what we see is the global view of what's happening with many different players. So the vast majority of our customers are utilities, but we also have gas and oil companies and OEMs that we serve. And again, we are the software behind those activities. So what we provide the entire journey for the drivers, for the operators, and also for the ecosystem. So it's solutions for the drivers, which are white label, the solution for the fleets, for the automakers, for municipalities, commercial and industrial buildings. It's solutions for the operators. And if you look at the charging network, it's normally not as stable as you want it to be. There are a variety of chargers, and they're not operating in the proper way in many times. So what we've developed algorithms to figure out which chargers are operating, which are not. And in over 80% of the cases that can be solved remotely, we solve it automatically with self-healing mechanisms. So we have developed tools like billing and smart energy management, and we are combining all of that so that you can have a VIP plan, and then in this VIP plan, you can get more energy. Because when you look at issues like depots, charger depots, then you don't have enough energy in the depots. What do? Then we start to add renewables and additional transformers and batteries and so on, but you need to manage it properly. So we've developed algorithms to manage that, and we are leading some of and as part of some of the organizations to develop the protocols around EV charging, whether it's the charger, the connection to the charge between the back office and the chargers, like OCPP, or OCPI, which is the ability to connect in roaming different players. So for instance, EVgo and ChargePoint are connected in roaming via the OCPI protocol. It means that each driver from each network can charge transparently. Whether you are a driver in the EV network, you can charge in ChargePoint, and vice versa. And it's going to happen within the entire network, different parties in the US. So the overall capability to manage the chargers, the drivers, the connection to the utility enables us to see the entire picture, balance the load, provide proper solutions to the fleets. And by the way, fleets are growing kind of really fast everywhere. And we started with taxi fleets in Colombia, then in London, and certainly in different parts of the US. And then now we are managing fleets of trucks and buses. And so it's large variety. So we need to fit our solution to the different business models. And then you can charge the drivers per kilowatt hour or per time or per any way that you like. We need to be disruptive. You need to enable the change. So as kind of a startup company that provides a technology behind the infrastructure, we need to be flexible. We need to move fast. And we are bringing some knowledge from Europe to the US, from the US to Europe, to other places, working together to create something new, some new environment. And we are really passionate about creating this change and just looking ourselves as part of this revolution. And it's great to see large corporates like in the team here just moving ahead, having more progress. And we see that the revolution is happening. And even though now that you have the COVID-19 all over, so we saw some decline in the amount of charging, the public charging, increase in the home charging. And on the other hand, in the EU, for instance, there are regulations, what the EU declares is to keep on financing projects around EV charging. Like in Germany, they announced that they are going to invest in electrifying all the gas stations, all the petrol stations in the country. So you see a lot of change and movement, even though the COVID, and maybe because of COVID, less of public transportation means more driving, and then EVs becomes something which is more mainstream. Still way to go, but we are heading there.
No, those are great comments. I think there's a vast amount of knowledge that can be shared from European colleagues as to what they've been doing. It feels like they're at least a year or two ahead, especially in the public infrastructure build out. So really appreciate the remarks. And people tend to forget, they think of infrastructure as just hardware. With cloud-based computing, software has become so critical. The remarkable things that your company's doing, folks on our NLX team and what they're developing, it's an exciting space. I don't pretend to understand the software side of things, but it's amazing what they're able to do now with the technology, marrying it up with other types of grid services. So with that, I'm going to actually pivot to our list of questions here for our panelists. So be ready, guys. I'm going to pick on our utility folks first, because that's the first question kind of touches on why we should work with utilities. So the question is, why is planning ahead for infrastructure build out important? And when should you involve your utility? So for that, why don't we start with Lincoln, and then we'll pivot over to Michael, and then any of the other panelists, if you're feel free to jump in. But Lincoln, let's start with you, followed by Michael.
So I'll start with your last question first. The answer is as soon as possible. In some cases, it might be yesterday. It's really, really helpful to bring your utility in as soon as possible. And the issue is, infrastructure upgrades, if we need to do them, take time. And you really only want to dig up the concrete once if you have to do that, or anything else that the utility might have to do. And so the more time we have to figure out that lead time, the more successful we're going to be in terms of just moving forward in general. And, it may differ somewhat between light duty, even heavy duty, and especially even within light duty, you may get into a situation like an apartment complex. And do you have chargers at one part of the parking lot, or do you put them in a very large complex over many different areas? Trying to think through all of those issues, bringing in the service, those are all things that we need to think through early.
Yeah, I agree with the way that Lincoln framed that. The early engagement is really helpful, and that's a big part of the way we've tried to structure our programs, so that there's a lot of awareness out there for those who may be looking to electrify, that they understand the steps of the process that they'll be following with us, and understand that there are kind of milestones that we need to look for together. And likewise, I think the earlier the engagement, especially when it comes to larger installations, whether those be fleets or even a large apartment or a condominium complex, knowing that information early helps from a regional planning perspective, because we may have other projects in a particular area that will implicate other types of grid infrastructure upgrades. And knowing that early helps us to plan, helps us to do that cost effectively, and to make the deployment process feel smooth and prompt for our site hosts.
Great.
And Kyle,
go ahead.
Sorry, Kyle. I was just going to add, as someone who deploys a lot of infrastructure at a very fast pace, this is extremely important, right? This early conversation, because when we look at an area, right, we sort of set up these target areas where we know infrastructure is needed. So we'll look at maybe 10 properties to get down to one. So we've really had to work with utilities to look at this a little bit differently and faster, and to go through this sort of sorting process, right? Usually utilities used to, okay, someone's building a building and they need infrastructure at this property. We're coming to them saying, here's 10 sites. What's the power availability on every single one of these? Where's it located? Where's it going to come from? So then I can make the best decision based on the economics, based on the host requirements, right? These other permitting issues, to get me to a point where, okay, this is the site I'm going to build, and we can move forward. So we've sort of had a change over the last couple of years and really work with a lot of utility partners to think about this differently, to bolster that front end, to put more resources, more effort to help sort through locations quicker.
All right, and I will move on to our second question here, somewhat related. What are some of the considerations in deploying EV charging infrastructure that are unique and light-duty vehicle charging when compared to, for example, medium and heavy-duty charging, respectively? And how do those shape strategies for growing the infrastructure, both from policy standpoint and from operational? So how would you guys, and I actually would take it one step further. There's residential charging, workplace charging, there's opportunistic public charging with level 2, DC fast charging, and then obviously fleet operations. How do you guys differentiate the infrastructure challenges for those different applications? And maybe Kelly, I'll start with you. You're an auto manufacturer. When you talk to customers about residential charging, you talk about that. Maybe you can kick us off with talking about residential, and Doron will talk to you about some of the European experience and turn it over to the rest of the panel.
Yeah, so from a residential standpoint, and yeah, Kyle, I like the way you organized that list, because there's really totally different needs for charging based on the vehicle type, and based on if it's residential or fleet, or if they're focused more on public charging. But as far as the residential side goes, what we know is that customers want to have as much information as possible up front so they can plan ahead. So especially with the Volt, the plug-in hybrid that GM offered, we had a ton of people just using level 1 charging. We still see a lot of that actually with the Bolt EV, myself included. I've done the math, you know, typically people are driving 40 to 50 miles per day. A level 1 charging cord that comes with the Bolt EV is perfectly sufficient to still get you back up to 100% every morning, since your vehicle is just kind of sitting in your garage anyhow. So a lot of our customers have done that same math to say, 0 install cost, the cord comes with the car, cool, I'm going to use level 1 charging. So we do still see a lot of that with the Bolt EV. I think that as we get larger vehicles introduced into the market, you know, the Hummer is not going to have the same efficiency as the Bolt EV, right? And so I do think we'll see higher adoption of level 2 home charging, where it really becomes important for the customer to know, how do I understand what my current home charging situation can supply to my vehicle, and what cost would be incurred from me if I wanted to install a level 2 station. And so what's nice about this Qmerit partnership is it does, it requires the customer to put a little more work up front to take pictures of their panel, to take pictures of where they want their charging station installed, et cetera. But it simplifies the process for them later on, because they're able to get an intelligent quote digitally before they have to have a bunch of different electricians coming out to their home to understand how much it might cost for them to put in level 2 charging. So I think that's huge. And as we get bigger vehicles, we will be introducing the dual charge cord with the vehicle. So you get that, you know, separate pigtail, so you can do level 2 charging at home without needing to buy a separate unit. So that's what we're supplying for our customers to make the home charging piece more seamless, because we do know it's such a huge piece of the charging equation for customers when they think about where they're going to charge their EV.
Really helpful. So Doron, how about workplace charging, fleet operations, and public charging? What are you guys seeing with the network that you operate globally?
So we see a lot of growth now in the home charging, either single dwelling or multi-dwelling. What we see is that in some countries, legislation said that the charges must be managed. So in some cases, it's not managed, but it needs to be managed because of the concern of the utilities, of their ability to provide the power and control the power in the local area. And more than that, as our friends in Enel did, you can monetize what you're doing at the home charging can be monetized if you're looking at it as a tool for the demand response. So we see more and more kind of home and multi-dwelling, and there are different challenges when you're doing multi-dwelling. Is how the energy is managed. Do you have 1 meter or each meter to each charger? How do you split the costs and stuff like that? And if you look at depot charging, we see, for instance, places when you have depots with lots of vehicles, then you start to see issue of capacities. So even in our garage over here in the building, we don't have enough power to manage all the EVs in the level 1 parking. So what do? You add more transformers, okay, but what's the limit? It costs a lot of money. So we have developed tools for smart energy management, first of all, in the vehicle level, meaning in the charger level. Then it goes to the parking level, the campus level, and beyond. So we know how to connect that to batteries, renewables, and how to balance all the energy according to the profiles and needs of the customers. So now we're working also as part of the EU projects, Horizon 2020 projects, of projects like mass scale deployment of EV charging in connection to the grid, and looking at the different protocols. So which protocols are you going to use across the channel? And then we are trying to combine European protocols like OCPP and OCPI, and American protocols like OpenADR in order to manage the power. So that's being done with this variety of universities, utilities, and so on. And if you look at truck charging and bus charging, then you need to take care of the size of the vehicle and also add the data of the parking lot and the side of the parking lot, and also add that to the equation. So what we found out is that the profiles of the users, the profiles of the site, and then the definition about how that correlates to the ability to provide the power to the site becomes more and more critical, especially when you look at the energy profiles, and then if you want to connect it to the demand response side.
That's really helpful. We only have a few more minutes left. I'm going to turn to Robert. And Robert, the question I was going to ask you, we're going to try and slip in at least one more question before we do wrap-up thoughts, and that is, in addition to infrastructure and vehicle incentives, I'm a Washington, D.C. policy guy, so I'm curious what your answers and the other answers would be. What else should policymakers be considering from an infrastructure standpoint?
So a big one for us is always, what are our roadblocks, right? And so permitting issues are a big issue for us. They're a huge issue in California, and so we've done quite a bit of work. But we were seeing permitting times that were 2-3 times longer than the national average in terms of getting charging stations in. So there has to be a tremendous amount of more work done to help streamline permitting and get those things in. We did it for solar, right? Over the last couple decades. We could do the same thing for public infrastructure. So we really have to head that way and figuring out how we can streamline things, make it easier to get these things installed. The other one is, this is a growing market, right? So people are putting a lot of capital to sort of spur the market from an infrastructure standpoint, but the utilization isn't there, right? And so costs are pretty heavy. So certainly from a rate standpoint, utility rate standpoint, more has to be done across the country. I think the efforts that like Southern California Edison has done with their zero demand for 5 years and then it tapers up, something to try to incentivize the market, right? To put the infrastructure in, lower the overall fixed costs of that infrastructure during this growing period. And then once we have more cars, then we can sort of pay our fair share as the utilization goes up. So I think those two areas are big roadblocks to more infrastructure going out.
I appreciate that. And since we're running out of time, I'll give the other panelists an opportunity to offer up a sentence in response to that question or offer your closing thoughts, what you want to convey to folks before we open it up to the live Q&A portion. So anybody else want to weigh in on other items, maybe a sentence or two about beyond infrastructure incentives, other policy changes you'd like to see? Otherwise, I'll turn it back to Robert to give his closing thought, and we'll turn to each one of you.
Maybe just one quick thought, Kyle, on the policy question. Excuse me, and that goes to, I agree totally with what Robert was saying around those elements of how we address permitting timing and also how we think about rate structures and the incentivizing component. I think the other two will come back to how do we think about infrastructure deployment targets on a regional and statewide basis, maybe even more broadly, connected to the EV adoption targets and, whether it be carbon reduction, air pollution, economic opportunity. There's a lot of connected elements to any goals you would set around EV adoption in a particular region. And I think having infrastructure goals associated with that tie to what needs to be there to support that ecosystem. Kelly made a good point. There's so many different ways now that we go about this. But it's important that we have those clear objectives so that when decision makers, enablers, policymakers, so forth, can support with both incentives and decision making with utilities around what needs to get deployed and by when, we have those clear targets to work with.
Great. And Kelly, any final thoughts for the panel discussion?
I would just say that I'm glad we're all continuing to have these conversations, because it definitely feels like, especially in the last 3 years, that we're really making a lot of great, meaningful progress to getting EV adoption more mainstream. And so I'm thankful to all the different players in the ecosystem that are pushing forward so diligently every day on this.
Thank you. Let's go Doron, Lincoln, and then Robert. So closing thoughts.
So I'll jump in. So first of all, I second Kelly. I think that it's amazing to see the progress and how the markets are now getting towards this dream that all of us has. I think that, and I know some of you like Rob, we think that this dream is something that you are following up for almost a decade, and it's exciting to see that happening. We need to remember that there's an entire ecosystem around us. So there is the cars and the utilities and the operators, but eventually we have a driver, and we need to take care of the driver, and we need to take care of the fleet, and we need to take care of the business that they have. And their state of mind is they want to have fun, they want to make money, they want to live. And what we need to do is to make it a lot easier for them. So building together something which will make their life easier, easier infrastructure, easier approach, easy journey. That's something that I think it should be on the first thing that we think about, even when we're looking on the infrastructure.
Well said. Well said. Lincoln.
So one last thing I would add is on my non-EV life, I have a 57 Chevy Bel Air, complete with the tail fins, the whole bit. And I'm living this exact conversation in the opposite way. I'm trying to find people that are knowledgeable about the car, trying to find parts for it, anything in that whole restoration journey. So I think about the parallel with the Bel Air and where we are today, because if the Bel Air is completely a mechanical machine. When you get in an EV, it's a computer on wheels. And so the skills that are needed to service the Bel Air are going to be very different than the ones going forward for EVs. So when we think about any sort of policy action, I want to make sure that we don't leave out the workforce and the people that it's not just transitioning the equipment and the infrastructure, it's the whole industry and people behind it. And how do we navigate to that section? I'm really excited though that we're even here today to have that conversation. I think that means success is happening and can't wait to see where we go.
Very good comment, and that deserves a whole panel discussion in and of itself. Robert, you're going to take us out.
Right. So I'll just touch on, I think, an important point that Doron made, right? And that's the driver at the end of the day. And how do we take care of that driver? Not only today, but as you get to 30, 40, 50%, 100% penetration of zero emission vehicles. So everything we do needs to be with that in mind, and making sure we put the right kind of infrastructure, not only for people that have a place to park in a garage overnight, but people who park in the street. And we need to make sure that EV infrastructure is ubiquitous, it's accessible, and everyone has a right to it, right? And everybody can get to it and use it just like they do fueling stations today. So we really need to focus that. And I think, everyone I've talked to in the industry, whether it's automakers, utilities, technology partners, I think everybody's on the same sort of wavelength. And we've made a lot of progress over the last 10, 15 years. So it's really exciting where we're going to take this in the next 5 to 10.
Well, thank you, Robert. Very well said. I couldn't have come up with better closing remarks. Very much appreciate it. I want to thank all of our panelists for participating today. And thank you, the viewer, for sitting through this panel discussion and listening to all of us. We're going to be transitioning now from what has been a recorded panel discussion to a live Q&A. So we may appear a little bit different in the next piece of this segment, but hang in there with us. Please go ahead and submit your questions, and I'll compile those, and I will turn to each of our panelists and see what kind of answers we can get for you. So again, thank you for sitting through this recorded portion of the event, and we're excited to now transition over to the live Q&A.